Recorded live from Portland, Oregon, it's the Transamorous Network podcast. Let's get it on. Okay, Tierre, your turn. So, how long did you know that you were trans attracted, and how did you find that out?
I would say the onset of puberty, but I actually had I would say I was always fascinated with uh, uh, seeing people that played with gender from a young age. Even seeing, like the Sally Jessy Raphael guest members, or Donahue guest members, or the drag queen they would bring out on a sitcom to make a punchline. But there was always a fascination and response for me from that. So with the onset of puberty, I went through a push pull as far as my attraction to this, because I was raised in the South in a pretty conservative religious background, and my introduction to a lot of the racier aspects of it was through illicit things I got illicitly, like getting porn at underage, and flipping to the back and seeing like the advertisements for transsexuals, or she-males or whatever, and having this strong physical reaction and going through this push pull of shame, and then acknowledgement of this attraction. It wasn't until midway through my college experience that I really made a decision to take this attraction out of my head, as far as the fantasy of it, and actually try to meet a trans person and see how that would be.
And what did you do to exercise that?
It was very roughshod. One of my first experiences was actually getting a book from an adult bookstore, and I didn't know it at the time, but it was a swingers magazine. There was a very much a strong element of trans advertisement in there, and I didn't realize at the time that the people advertising were escorts. I just thought they were looking for companionship. So I called one of the numbers. 17, 18 years old. I called one of the numbers. She was very gracious with me. She invited me over to her place, and we sat and had a conversation and everything, and none of her business ever came up, but it was a rough curve as far as learning.
I'm sure she was very disappointed.
I'm sure she was very disappointed.
Are you being serious?
I think she knew when she saw how young I was and how inexperienced I was, it wasn't going to be a fruitful situation for her. But she was very gracious anyway.
Very nice.
So I was home for college one summer, and I just decided I'm going to meet a transsexual woman and see how this is, see what it's like. So I went to the gay clubs, to the drag night, to see if I could, meet a transsexual woman. All the people that were, I don't even know if they were transsexual, but the only people that were of that, of the gender non-conforming variety were the ones that were performing on stage, and I didn't really have access to them. Mm-hmm. So funnily enough, I was driving on my way home, and I pull up to a red light, and the car beside me pulls up, and there's this garishly dressed woman in the front passenger seat, and I could tell immediately this is a performer. This is a non-gender conforming person. But the person in the back was this beautiful brown woman, and she had seen my I guess she had watched my eyes attract to her friend in the passenger seat, but she started tapping on the window and rolled down her window and shouted out her number to me, and I had my first date.
Oh wow! Isn't it funny how he went out looking, trying to you went out trying to manufacture the hookup, and then it didn't happen, and then on your way home, in this kind of inconsequential way, you got what you wanted.
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes you call and the universe answers in a way that you don't expect.
Exactly.
Usually.
Yeah, exactly.
Usually the way you don't expect it.
So what happened? What happened with that date?
So she was, as I say, I was probably 20 or 21 years old. I was home for the summer, just working a temp job, trying to figure out what I'm doing as far as college, and I took her to, I think I took her to a Chinese restaurant, and she didn't look the same in daylight that she did at nighttime.
You're so politically correct in your wordage.
So my mother taught me to be a gentleman, and we had a fun time on the date. Afterwards, I took her to the movies, and it got hot and heavy at the movies. Like I don't know what movie we went to see, but I know that I had to get her home immediately after the movies, and that's when I really got an introduction to what the trans life had to offer.
Yeah.
So her look did not affect what eventually happened.
Exactly.
Right.
So you were basically confirmed. You basically confirmed that you were trans attracted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Very nice. And then, so I presume that relationship didn't go anywhere?
No, it was, as I said, I was just home for the summer, and I started getting a drift from like seeing her home environment. She was rooming with another trans woman, and seeing their interactions together. I kind of got the feeling that she was in a alternative employment situation.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, so I don't.
Correct in his wordage.
I'm the only person she was seeing on a romantic basis.
Got it.
So I didn't take her seriously, even though she had an affinity for me and she really wanted me to like really engage with her more.
Mm-hmm.
There was a stark age difference. She was probably about 10 years my senior at the time, and seeing I was green as they come, but I knew enough to know this is probably not dating material. I can't bring her home to mom.
Yeah. It's interesting that you are most of the men that we have spoken with, if not all of them, are very smart men. Mm-hmm. And Tierre here has a PhD. Your PhD is in chemistry?
Actually, I didn't finish my PhD. I actually exited that PhD program and went into the work industry. So I just work as a chemist now at Coca-Cola.
I see. So you're all but dissertation?
He got distracted.
Yeah. During the course of that PhD, I was actually in another relationship with the young lady, and things went east, west, south, every direction but what the direction they were supposed to go. Okay. So yeah, that didn't happen.
What are your parents? I presume you're out with your parents?
My father's passed. And funnily enough, the weekend that I buried my father, I came out to my mother. My parents were never together while I was alive. I termed myself funnily as an oops baby, an exit prize. Okay. They were together probably around 10 years. So I have an older sister that's almost 10 years older than me. And they were getting close to divorce when I was conceived. So I never lived in a household with my father. So it was always with my mother. And my father, he was a brilliant man, but he was unfocused, and he chose to live a life of, how can I say it? He chose to live a more simple life than what could have been allotted to him. He had a college degree. He was a lieutenant adjutant in the ROTC at his college, but he chose to live life of just a simple handyman. He kind of had a disdain for a white collar lifestyle. I don't know where that came from because, as I say, I didn't really have a chance to grow up in his household.
And so when you came out to your mom, how did that? I hope that wasn't like the same day as the wake or whatever.
It was the day after the memorial service, so it was. I thought it was brilliant timing at the time, just because it was a weight off my shoulders, and I felt it like it was a tribute to my father, who lived in a way that he wanted to unapologetically. But thinking about it now was a very insensitive thing to do.
So how did it happen? How did it go?
I went down for the memorial. I was living here in Georgia at the time. I was in a relationship with a young woman, the young woman previously to me meeting Simaya, and I had actually taken her down to meet my mother previously, and made an attempt to make that introduction to her and kind of come out. My mother had an idea of my predilections just because we'd lived in the same household in different periods of time with me as an adult, and I'd spent time up in Minnesota living with a trans woman, and they'd had phone interactions, but they never met in person. But my mother was able to tell that the direction I was going, even if she wasn't able to so I took that opportunity to just like clear the air fully that I'm your son. I'm attracted to trans women. I am currently with a trans woman.
And what did she say?
Torpedoed is probably a good word for describing it. Even if you have an inkling of what the person is about, or what they're into, having that confirmation, especially at that time, right after she had buried man that was, at one point in time going to be the love of her life. It was. I kind of dropped the bomb and ran. Her, and then I went out with friends. Her with another friend of mine. Actually, she was an ex-girlfriend of mine that had come down in support of me for the memorial at the time. And the ex-girlfriend kind of, I left to go back to Georgia. I had to get back to work, and the girlfriend had to stay for overnight, and she kind of was able to witness my mom processing this information I gave her, and she was kind of gobsmacked by it.
Yeah. It is kind of unfortunate, but how is she now about it?
It was very much. She's fine with it now. Her and Samaya are building a relationship together. They're both Leo women, so I always.
Sorry,
but
she's a dream.
It was not smooth sailing because at first, before we. Samaya and her didn't really come together in the same room together amicably
until
our wedding reception.
Wow! Oh, wow! So does the reception come before or after the wedding?
Can I? Okay, let me give you a little context here. So I met when I started dating Tierre. Initially, before his mother knew that I was trans, we would have minimal conversations on the phone, and then at some point she asked, or I think maybe I had met his sister, and she and I had the conversation. His sister lives here in Atlanta, or Douglasville. a suburb of Atlanta. And I had the conversation with her, so I guess she let her mom know. So then the mother, I remember it was like a Christmas, and I had sent a Christmas card. We had been together for about 2 years at that point.
2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 years, and I had sent his mother a Christmas card. Well, I would always send her a Christmas cards, but this particular time, I sent her a Christmas card and I signed it. Mm-hmm. Talking to him for
about 6 months, I would say.
About 6 months. She just stopped speaking to him. She stopped returning calls. It was like she was just over it. And so that kind of informed how I felt about her. Because in my mind, those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Of you, but I don't have,
Yeah.
God bless you, but you can just, go about your life. And but over time, I think so. I had met by that point. He started introducing me to family. He started very early introducing me to his family. So I had met every member of his family but his mom, and they all had nothing but good things to say about me. She was kind of wore down by the tide of me. Oh, like I'm talking about going to family reunions, and if I came, she wouldn't show up.
How did she know you were coming?
Wow. Family, because at the end, she coming, it was a thing still. And so the mom wouldn't show up if I was there. She kind of consciously avoided family gatherings that I would be at. But meanwhile, I'm deepening relations with the rest of his family. Mm-hmm. By the time he proposed to me and we were going to get married, she had to accept the fact that at some point, okay, I'm going to have to meet this person. He had even attempted to bring me down to Florida to meet her. And we were on her way to her house and she rejected it. Like she was not, we were at her house. I passed by the house.
Wow.
Because she just didn't want to meet me. Wow. So the wedding, actually, the reception was when the mother and I had our first encounter, and it wasn't great.
How'd it go? What happened?
I actually had a change with her before the reception.
Yeah, I had exchange with her when she was checking into the hotel that we were having it at. And she saw me, knew who I was, and I knew who she was. And she goes, yeah. And my response as another Leo woman was, And I was with a girlfriend at the time who was helping me get ready for the wedding, and I was actually headed out to my bachelorette party the night before. And I was very sexily dressed, and so I guess maybe that informed too her opinion of me because I was scaring the wind. And so she kind of like did and I did it back at her, and my girlfriend goes, "Who was that?" And I was like, "Oh, that's my mother-in-law."
Wait a minute. When you went, wait a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So Simaya, when you went back at her, what did she do?
She was horrible. She was. I guess she thought I was just gonna be like, oh.
And just to give context, she was literally her mother-in-law at the time because we had our wedding ceremony in Hawaii, and we had a reception 3 weeks later for friends and family that wouldn't be able to make it. So we were married at the time.
So I didn't feel like I had to prove nothing to her, honey. I'm here. You're gonna, you know what I mean? So at that point, I was just like, again, I could have had a VA. So I wasn't really pressed about. I wasn't really pressed about it, But my girlfriend goes, "That's your mother-in-law?" And I was like, "Yes." And she was like, "Girl, you're gonna have to do better." And I was like, "I know, but I just wasn't prepared for that reaction." And she gave it to me, so I gave it back. So we had the next morning. This was the night before we were going out. We stayed in the hotel that night, and then the next morning we had a marriage blessing / reception. I got dolled up back in the dress. I did the big grand entrance down this big ballroom, right down the staircase, immediately into our first dance. And so she's watching me in my element. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I had already been working in community. I was very involved here in the trans community in Atlanta. So I had all of that love in the room. We had all of our guests. I had people, and my parents were also there. So my mother and father, who I didn't think would ever attend my wedding, were also in the room. And so his mother was the last of my concern. My mama, my daddy was my concern.
Right.
So, and they had never really seen, I would like to say, me in my full regalia. Mm-hmm. We had an Indian themed wedding. So I'm like draped, garbed in all of this jewelry. You know, it was just like I was carrying some shit on me. And so my father, that was his first time seeing me at like the apex of my beauty. I mean, and I had invested in my little outfit and garment and things. So that was his first time seeing me in my fullness. And I watched my father cry. And this is the same man that was like so negative all of these years and just so anti. But he cried and he told me that I was beautiful.
Oh my gosh.
And that was the first time my father had ever said it.
Oh my gosh.
And mother, I think, witnessing me surrounded by this love and then seeing my parents also feeling awkward, but then seeing their reaction, I think it softened her.
Yeah.
And she was willing to at least begin having a relationship. So after the reception, we went out that night for like little cocktails with his mom and some of his family. And from there, it was baby steps. Now, we're still very strong, opinionated women. So it's still like, hey, there's always that awkwardness in the beginning. But she respects me, and I respect her on such a deep level. She respects me because I'm still here, and her son has risen from the ashes under my tutelage. And
look at Tierre. Would you agree with that, Tierre?
That I improved his quality of life. But at the same time, she still had to adjust to her values and her systems behind it. And when she realized that I was a woman of standard, that I was a woman of God, that I was a woman of community, that I was educated, that I could speak the level and have the level of conversation that she would expect of a daughter, and I was beautiful and she could be proud to show me to people, she eventually came around. And now, when she calls him, we end up talking longer than they talk.
Wow.
Yeah. So mama likes me and I like her.
But it was a road and a journey.
It was a road and a journey.
It's a winding road.
But it's such a perfect story of how.
It's a beautiful story.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story of how you can come around. And it's funny that you kind of gave back what she gave to you that first encounter, and it was like you kind of set the bar of what the relationship was going to be. You didn't take no shit, so to speak.
And she respects my gangster. So even now, still have like conversations where she'll try to hit me with the respectability, and I'm like, I didn't ask for your feedback. Love you, and I was an elder, but I asked for none of your feedback, and you can keep that.
Wow.
And she'll be like taken back, but then it deepens her level of respect because now she knows what I expect.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because
on how they gonna treat you.
Yeah. And I feel like this, if I could look my daddy in the eye and my mom in the eye and tell them, either it is or it ain't, and if you're not with it, you can get the hell on. I'm definitely not afraid to tell somebody else, mama.
Right.
Yeah. Right on.
It's like be on my page, or we're not gonna be around each other. Right. And things have gone good.
Good.
It's so interesting because we don't often have. Well, we talk to a lot of very strong trans women and trans attracted men. I don't remember a story as powerful as this one that you're telling. It's like, you talk about being at the apex of your beauty during your wedding. You're like so far the apex of an example of a powerful trans woman and what that can mean. I mean, Nikki Outercruise. Do you know Nikki Outercruise? Out of
Not
Texas.
personally, but I do know her through community.
Okay, so we had her on the show just before we started this show with you guys, and we couldn't finish the interview because the internet connection was really bad. But she comes off in the same powerful way that you're occurring. It's like there's some trans women who they're in their power.
Yes, yes.
And that can have not only a transformative effect around who they're around, but when they get married to a guy, that can like transform that guy's experience, the guy's life experience. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like that's what it's done. Would you agree to that, Tierre?
Definitely. Yeah. I definitely am not living a life I would otherwise.
So let's play into that. What would you otherwise be doing, do you think?
I think when I say that, being with a trans woman like Simaya, I'm not only marrying her, I'm marrying into the community that she resides in.
Looks like we have some technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get it right back. Just one moment. So welcome back. We had a couple of technical difficulties, but I think we got it worked out. So Tierre, you were just about to tell us, or you were in the process of telling us, how being with Simaya has you living a life that you wouldn't have lived otherwise. So what would that life have looked like, do you think?
Well, I come from a very conservative Black Southern background. I was steeped in African Methodist Episcopal religion. So we're very constricted in our points of view. I'd probably be married with kids right now. But I wouldn't have the life that I'm living now. I've, as a result of being with Simaya, I've married into a community. And as a result of that, I've gained several mothers, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters. At least here in Atlanta, it's a community that tries to meld together and tries to stay abreast of each other.
Yeah.
Because we do live in a very adverse situation at the end of the day.
Yeah, you do. So it's interesting. So we're gonna end the show because it's been a really good amount of time we've spoken with you guys, and maybe it would be nice to have you guys back on at some point in the future if you're open to that. But
we would love to.
Oh, great. But as we wrap up the show, I want to ask both to Simaya and to you, Tierre, what would you say to a guy like yourself, Tierre, or a guy who might be interested in you, Simaya, who is not out like Tierre is, who's struggling with who they are, who hasn't really owned it yet, and doesn't know, they're kind of lost, you know what I'm saying? And then also, what would you say to that guy based on your experience, both of you? And then also, what would you say to a trans woman who is believing that she could never in her wildest dreams have what you have, Simaya? What would you say to that kind of person also?
Okay. So to the gentleman that would be trans attracted, that has not yet embraced his truth as far as that being a preference, I would, but is still interested in getting to know a woman like myself, I would say you need to be intentional and about where you're about connecting to community and not just connecting to an individual for sexual purposes. Like if you really are trying to get to know and date and engage and live with them, you have to be comfortable meeting her where she is and also loving the people that she loves. Because a lot of times the chosen families, the people that we've created, these are the people that have sustained us. Right. These are the people that have loved us when our own families did not have the language or the ability to embrace us in the way that we needed to be. So I've had mothers, really strong, older mothers that have came into my life and really helped craft me as the woman that I was, that didn't birth me, but that are trans women who embraced me.
And
Cheryl Courtney Evans. I love the late great Cheryl Courtney Evans and the late great Alicia Newsom, my moms, RIP ladies. They had a very strong impact on me as a person, and my husband was willing to embrace that. On our second date, I had already been working in community and I was giving a cultural competency training for a black church. He came and supported me in that training. So if you're looking for a certain caliber of trans woman and you're looking for someone that is at that place in their life where they are somewhat aware, because I do believe that not just a physical transition is necessary, but also giving someone a chance to mentally get to a place where they've accepted themselves.
Yes.
You need to look for women that are in community, engaged, and you're going to have to then to go get out of your comfort zone, stop going to clubs and online and to these hookup spots to meet women and actually connect with them places where we engage and conduct ourselves and live.
Yes, well said.
So one my advice would be the woman in my situation who doesn't think that that's possible, it is raise the bar, sister. The day come and gone where we have to accept the random trade that will just have sex with us in that closed encounter. There are men, there are professional men that are out there, but what it requires though is that you elevate yourself to a place internally where you can receive that love.
Yes.
And understand that everybody that comes into your life is not a John. Everybody that comes into your life is not someone that's trying to take from you, and be aware enough of yourself to receive that love.
Very well said, Simaya. Very well said. Tierre?
From my perspective, I would say to the brother out there, first of all, a lot of men, their first experience having a trans woman on their radar is through sex, through porn. So you're gonna have to divorce yourself of that expectation that trans women are there for your sexual pleasure, for your approval. No, I mean, there are trans women that will try to lure you, they'll try to get your attention.
I was like, say it now, what you said?
Through sex, because that's a surefire way of getting a man's attention. A man has to understand that when you're looking for a relationship with another person, you're taking that person on 100%. You're not just taking on that person's looks, how they look on your arm. You're taking on that person's how they interact with their family, their history, the trauma that they've been through in life, the relationships they have with their parents, with their friends, the experiences they've been through professionally and just on a day-to-day basis. And you have to be willing to accept that. You have to distance yourself from this preconception of, men that are trans or attracted are always tagged with being gay. And you're going to have to divorce yourself of that word being a stigma. Because at the end of the day, you know who you're attracted to. And being called gay is people put that label on everything that they're not willing to accept.
Yeah.
You have to broaden your aspect. You have to broaden your horizons on what you do accept, because at the end of the day, we're all people. We're all trying to get by day to day. So you might have to, you might find yourself at a gay club. You might make friends with gay people. That's been a stigma that a lot of people, especially in the Black community, they have preconceptions about them that you have to do away with. There's a broad spectrum as far as sexuality and as far as people's expression of their sexuality.
And then for the trans women?
And as far as the trans women, like Simaya was saying, again, I see this again and again. Women sell themselves short. trans women have to embrace their womanhood first. Being a woman means you have the power in a relationship. At the end of the day, choose women choose who they're going to be with.
Yes.
Women make the right. Yeah. Women are, and trans women have to embrace their womanhood enough to be able to make the choice for themselves and not just accept what's given to them as far as substandard men. They have to, as Samaya said, raise the bar. They have to expect better for themselves. And as I was saying earlier, you need to teach people how you want them to treat you. You have to train people in how you want to be treated. You can't just accept mistreatment and you can't let it go by. Samaya, at the very beginning of our relationship, I said some things that were inappropriate and, just some, I would make a flippant joke about, some of the stereotypes of trans women as far as being, like scam artists or something like that. And Samaya would pull my collar up very quickly and get me right together, let me know that's not okay, that she needs to be respected.
And my community need to be respected, and everybody doesn't have the privilege that I have been blessed to have. And we will not look down on my sisters, and we will not joke about it. We will not make it something that is funny, because it's not funny. Because the reality of it is, the woman that you see today is a woman who came through all of that struggle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not funny because it's not.
Yeah.
And I had to, and I respect he was man enough to be able to accept that level of engagement. But I'm a cultural competency trainer by trade.
Yeah.
So I'm comfortable engaging. I train officers, people at universities, schools. I go on the tour circuit. So that's what I do.
So what I was saying was that you have to be able to be able to engage with that person before you at the end of the day. You can't treat somebody as just a caricature, as a stereotype, as somebody that, you have your idea of. You have to really listen to that person and hear what they've been through and really try to make a connection with that person. Because at the end of the day, it's just two people, it's just two people talking to each other.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say something else. What was I going to say? Well, anyway, yes, definitely. It's you have to engage with the person on an individual level, and gentlemen, mind your manners. Mind your manners. Treat her like a lady, as many songs said.
Yeah.
Because you have the opportunity to spend time with a beautiful woman in front of you, and you have to take full advantage of that and avail yourself and put your best foot forward.
Right on. Well, Tierre and Simaya, thank you so much for spending so much time.
It's been such a pleasure.
It has been a wonderful pleasure, and we'll be happy to have you guys on again later on. Yeah. And for the audience, for the listeners and the viewers, thanks for tolerating the technical difficulties we've had on this show. We haven't had that usually. But we really appreciate you sticking through it, and tune in next time. We'll have an even as interesting show.
That's right.
With always as interesting guests, because it's always interesting.
Always.
And in the meantime,
remember to like and share and tell your friends.
Yes, like and share and tell your friends, and we'll see you next time.